Mackenzie and Mark, so good to have you on Out of the Mouths. Thank you for coming today and being willing to share your story. We're so excited to hear about your adoption story. We've been praying for you guys and so happy that we finally made this happen. Why don't we start by just sharing a little bit about yourselves, your background, a little bit maybe even how you grew up. Mackenzie, if you want to start, that'd be great.
Sure, yeah. I grew up in Rhode Island. I have one sister, and I was public school growing up. I was really interested in hairdressing, so I was able to do the cosmetology program through the school I attended. From high school, I went right into the field of cosmetology. I was a hairdresser for 8 years, and that was really great. From there, I had taken on a hobby of photography and it ended up becoming like an 8 year career as well. I did wedding photography and family photography all while being married at that point and raising my children. And now I am a stay at home homeschool mom. So it's been quite the journey.
That's awesome. So
Thanks.
I'm always curious to know, did you have any personal experience growing up with adoption or foster care?
I had a little bit of experience because my mom temporarily fostered a couple of her siblings, so my aunt for a little while, which definitely sparked some questions and conversation. As a younger child, wanting to understand why she needed to live with us as opposed to her parents. But my mom's story was also something that she shared with me and was pretty open about. And she not only fostered her siblings, but prior to that was a foster child herself. And honestly, it always broke my heart hearing some of the things that she had gone through. So I do feel like that impacted me and my views on adoption and fostering, and for sure planted seeds that I think kind of brought us to where we are today.
Mm. Okay, and Mark, how about you? How did you grow up?
So I had kind of a bigger family growing up. It was me, my two other brothers, and my sister. And my father owned an excavation business, and we were able to take over the excavation business. So I run that now with my two other brothers, and we just have a lot of great memories. And I really enjoyed having a bigger family. So that's one of the things that led to us desiring to have a bigger family. So
Right.
I grew up in a family of 4 kids, and we have 4 kids now. We're excited to bring another one in.
Yeah, I can see how when you grow up in that environment, you want that for your own children as well.
Right.
Yeah, now, did you have any experience with foster care or adoption personally?
Not originally. We had when we first got married, we had always kind of talked about potentially adopting. It kind of went just like in the back of our minds. And then as we've gone through and had our kids, and we just really felt that this was the right time, you know.
Yeah, but probably his only experience with anybody in his life being adopted or anything with that is maybe just he knew my mom's story,
Right.
and I think you had a friend who was adopted, and
I did. I had a friend,
yeah.
one of my buddies growing up was adopted from Mexico.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So you were aware that that's a possibility for a family.
It was, but
Yeah.
it was not like it really ever came up. It was just more like a common knowledge.
I think it was cool for Mark to have had the experience of like being friends with someone who did grow up um, having been adopted, because when we were talking about um whether or not we thought God wanted us to pursue adoption, I remember him bringing up his friend and just saying, "Oh yeah, and he was adopted," but it was never like a negative thing. It was always just like a really cool part of his life. And so I think for him it actually just gave him that perspective and helped him to start like imagining our family doing the same.
Hmm.
Yeah, those experiences with other people who have been adopted, I think do really inform how we feel about adoption.
Mhm.
And if we see a positive experience, that it was just a normal way that a family came together,
Hmm.
that you can, like you said, envision that for your own family. So
Exactly.
that's beautiful. That's
Right.
wonderful. Okay, so now you guys obviously you got married and you started to your own family. At what point did the idea or the pursuit of adoption become real for you?
We had our first three biological children, and then we kind of always thought if we were going to have more children, we would want to look into adopting. And we did actually. And that was a few years ago. That was before this little one joined our family. We kind of started the process at that point. We made a couple of calls and we felt like God was saying, not yet, not right now. And it was almost frustrating because we thought it was such an amazing thing to do. Why would God say not yet? And then another year or so later, I I just realized that we were meant to have another biological baby. And so I think that that's why God at that point said, not yet. But I mean, don't you remember when she was a baby? I was like, we should start the adoption process now. Do you remember that?
Well, do you want to tell the story of how that all happened?
How what all happened?
How we got Oakley?
Sure. Why don't you tell the story?
Okay, so my wife had the wonderful idea of getting a vasectomy because we thought we were done with children
After 3.
after 3.
Mhm.
So I had a vasectomy and we weren't able to have kids anymore. Then God put it on her heart to have another baby. So we considered adoption because God can do miracles, but it's not what he chose to do.
And when we had the procedure done, I think it's because I wanted to adopt at some point.
Right.
And we felt like
We felt like
we didn't
we're,
need to have more
yeah,
biological because adoption was our future option for a 4th child should we feel called to a 4th child, right?
right. But she felt very strongly. And in most of the ideas in our lives, God always puts it on my wife's heart first. And then I come around to the idea. So having a vasectomy reversal was not something that I didn't want really have the vasectomy, never mind the vasectomy reversal. But for our family in that time, it seemed like it was the right decision.
Yeah, so when God kind of seemed to be closing the door on pursuing adoption, it was like the next step was reversing his vasectomy, which was such a God thing because we had called doctors who really discouraged that it was even possible or that the price was astronomical. And I ended up not only connecting with a girl whose husband had successfully had a vasectomy reversal and gone on to have another biological children, but they were literally local. In fact, I think he had a location in Oklahoma and a location here in Rhode Island, but she only told me about the Oklahoma location because she didn't know we were in Rhode Island. And she just said he has 2 locations. So I'm Googling it and I keep seeing Rhode Island. And I just thought that was really strange. And I realized his second location isn't another Oklahoma location, it's literally right down the road. So that eliminated having to like travel post surgery and all of that. So we felt like that was right in our face, exactly what we were meant to do.
Right.
Oh, you want to
So
do
he
my
was actually
hair?
a Christian man who did it as a ministry. So he used to do vasectomies, and God told him to stop and start doing it as a ministry. So where vasectomy reversal does not cover by insurance, it costs $12,000. He ends up doing it just for the cost of the procedure. It was like $2,000. So it was something that was completely within our wheelhouse. He was able to do this, and then we were able to.
Yeah, and so our first pregnancy post reversal was a really healthy pregnancy up until 12 and a half weeks. And then we found out the baby had no heartbeat. It was not related to any of the surgeries or anything. Other than that, it was a perfectly healthy pregnancy. But we were really blindsided because that was our first miscarriage and that was really, really hard. But eventually we, grieved that. And I think we'll always be so sad to have had that loss happen. But then God brought, our little daughter into our life. And I think that through reversing the vasectomy, our hearts to a bigger family opened. And we just kind of felt like almost really convicted over getting the vasectomy. And I'm not saying that every single family is going to have that same conviction, but we just almost instantly felt like we took growing our family out of God's hands and we just felt like we were meant for more. And I think at that point, he thought 4 was more. And I just still was back to that, like, I think we're supposed to adopt someday. So, kind of back to what I was saying, like, I asked him if he remembered when Oakley was a baby. I remember holding her and being like, we should start the adoption process because I've heard it can take years. And he was like joking, like, man, you're really like, how do you have baby fever? Well, you literally have a baby. But we also didn't know it would necessarily be a baby we adopted. I just wanted to get the process going because I knew it could take some time. And when we had explored adoption prior to that, we were looking into fostering first. And we felt like from the feedback from the different people we talked to, some testimonies people shared with us, that we were going to want to go the route of just straight adoption. So I think what Mark wanted to do was make sure we were in a position to emotionally and financially be able to, go forward with that.
I didn't know if after the miscarriage we were like, well, let's adopt now. But we felt like God was saying, like, no, just trust me, just keep going.
Yeah, but because it was like a little bit further along in the pregnancy and my levels for the pregnancy were really high, like my body didn't recognize the loss, and so it was holding on to the baby, and so I had to have surgery, and it was really tricky. But I did get through it, but it was quite the crazy ride. But we felt like the act of obedience after that was still pursuing another biological child. But after that, I felt like the next act of obedience was adopting, and
And
yeah.
for me, I don't want to be a non-present dad. I want to be a good father. And for me, like my biggest issue is making sure that I can, like you have more children and you want to be able to give each child the same amount of attention, you know? And I was very hesitant to have more kids because I didn't want to be a non-present dad. Actually pour into our children and hear our children out and actually be able to like parent our children individually as they need. Um,
But it's cool that God just stretches you when He wants you to grow your family. And I think there's also something really beautiful about sibling relationships.
yeah,
And so they might not have as much one on one time with mom and dad, although we do make an effort to have them each have their own individual time with us, bring them out for a little date or
yeah,
bring them to different events. That's just him with one or two of them or me with one or two of them. But even still, it's just like really cool to see that they have each other too. And so you're giving them the gift of a sibling you have their child as well.
Mackenzie, I love how you shared that you made this decision and you felt that immediate regret. Not that everybody does, but we had a similar situation.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
my husband did the same,
Mhm.
and I felt it immediately too. And it's wonderful how God can redeem all of that.
mm,
He's like,
Right.
I still have this plan. I still have the children that I want to be your children, and they're going to come about the way he plans anyway. What an amazing ministry that doctor has as well.
yeah,
So,
it's
if
very cool.
if we can, we'll share his information in the description box, and if anybody watching is in the same circumstance,
Mm,
Yeah.
we didn't know about that either. So
Right.
maybe back then, if we had known about a doctor like that, we would have taken that route as well.
Yeah.
So that's amazing, and we're so glad that God sustained your life through the loss of your baby, and that yeah, he obviously had a plan for you to have more children.
mm,
Yeah.
And that beautiful little one who just went off to play.
Yes.
And now you're on this new next phase. You're in the next phase to the next child. So I think it's important to talk about how you go from the mindset switch from biological to adoptive
Mhm.
children. And so what was that like? Like, so okay, I have this on my heart. I want to adopt. We know God wants to grow our family, and this is the way He's going to do it now. Um,
Mhm.
and when did it become we can go now?
yeah. I think that the root of adoption is choosing to take someone who is not part of your family and bring them into your family. And that's the gospel. That's exactly what God did for us. God didn't have to, but He foreloved us, He forechose us to adopt us into His family, right? And so, as believers and as Christians, one, we are obviously pro-life. We think that every child should have the opportunity, right, for life. We think life is precious. We think life starts at conception, and um, so being able to act out our faith in that way by bringing a child into our home was something that we knew we wanted to do. It was more than something.
So that's an
Mhm.
important part of this puzzle for you guys, as you shared pre-interview, that this process of doing a private adoption has even more. You've stepped into your role as a Christian and a follower of Christ of
Mm,
caring for everyone um, through the adoption process with even the birth mom,
mm,
right?
Yes.
And I'm very intrigued about how this process has gone for you guys and how
Mhm.
much your agency and you guys personally have done for this mother who has chosen life for her child.
Yeah, well, I think that's the first thing to recognize is how much of a brave and amazing person these expectant moms are who are choosing life for their baby, knowing that it might be a really hard thing for them. Well, most definitely be a really hard thing for them to temporarily part ways. And I say temporarily because now open adoption is so common because of the benefit to all involved. And we're really thankful and hopeful for an open adoption. And we think that's really healthy for the child, for his birth mother, and we're we're excited to see what that looks like. But the love really goes beyond just the child we'll be adopting and truly to the expectant mom as well. And I think that that's because we recognize the sacrifice she's making for the better life that she wants. And we've just not shied away from sharing that with her the whole time.
Especially in a world where it's way easier just to end it. And it's totally socially acceptable. It's promoted. It's
To the
way
world.
for the world. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
way easier just to say, no, I don't want to do this. I'm done. But for a expected mother to have enough love for her child to know that she can't give that child the life that she desires for him, but that there's families who are willing to open their home and take on the task of raising a child as their own. It really is a very heroic thing,
It
you
is.
know.
And we didn't know what that process was like when we first started reaching out to agencies. We didn't know that it was going to be a baby that wasn't even born yet that we would be adopting. We assumed it would probably be a young child, but we quickly learned that oftentimes children who are older than 6 months old are typically already in a foster care program. And so the children that have the adoption need are typically from mothers who are pregnant and a lot of times in a crisis pregnancy and want to make an adoption plan. So they feel like they've explored their options for parenting versus making an adoption plan. And when they've decided that an adoption plan is the route they want to go, it makes more sense for them to do that while they're pregnant. And so that adoption can happen after the birth as opposed to however many months down the road. So the way it looked for us was after getting home study approved, our profile, which was just a little book that we put together with information about ourselves, our family, our values. It was actually given to different expectant moms and dads to look through. And they really got to take their time to decide what family they envisioned their child being raised in. And so that's a really cool thing too, because they're not just making an adoption plan and don't really know what the life of their child will look like. They really start to get a vision for what that will look like from the start.
The mother,
Expectant mother.
expected mother, they really do have full control over the whole thing. It's not like we're forcing them to do anything. It's not like they are not. So most agencies, they'll actually counsel them for free for months and months ahead of time just to make sure that they've exhausted every single option. And when they come to this decision, it's an informative and educated decision, and it's not a you know it's not a rash decision. You know.
So they help them see their options. If they were to have certain parts of their life situation change, would it be possible to parent? They work with them on those things. And then once the decision to make an adoption plan has happened, they provide the necessary counseling to make sure that they are they're emotionally okay, because that's a really hard decision. And again, then they get to then decide who they want to be parenting their child. And so we got that call back in October that an expectant mom had picked us, and we were blown away because we matched a lot faster than the average time. But the opposite was that we weren't matched with a baby due any week now. It was actually several months in advance. And so we've been waiting for about 4 months, but in just about a month now, the baby that we matched with the mom is due to be born. And so it's been a long journey, but we are just about there now. So we're really excited for that.
So you mentioned that the expectant moms, get counseling before even making an adoption plan to make sure this is the right choice for her. It sounds very extensive. Like they try to make sure that she's very certain that she wants to go the adoption route before any other decisions are made. So that brings me to a question: how else does the expectant mom? How else is she supported in this process?
So when we were working with our consultant at the beginning, she explained what the process was like for the expectant moms, and we also quickly learned how important it was to find like a very ethical agency, someone who was working side by side with these expectant moms and really being their advocate. Because what the agency will do is, as soon as they reach out to them, like Mark was explaining, they will talk to them about the different options, whether or not it is possible to try to parent with the right support and help, or whether or not it truly is best in their situation to make an adoption plan. So, if that's the way that they decide to go, they will be presented profiles like ours and choose a family. Now, part of the adoption fees is the adoptive families helping to care for the expectant mother through her pregnancy. So, that provides her with counseling, that provides her with housing, things that she needs from day to day, like a phone. And also, the agencies are there to make sure they're getting to their appointments, even if they have to physically drive them themselves, making sure their medical needs are cared for themselves and for the baby. It also provides all of the care in the hospital. For her and for baby, the birth, and then beyond that, it's usually on average of 2 months, but it varies from state to state or agency to agency. But 2 months of postpartum care, that includes counseling, that includes more. Support. I mean, we were thrilled to know that we weren't just spending money just because that's what the agency costs, but to know that that was being poured into the expectant moms that they help with all of their needs, their clothing, everything, because these moms have made such a brave decision to parent or to make an adoption plan rather when they feel that they're not equipped to parent, but they still need help. Like 9 months is a really long time, and they're not always in a situation to be able to buy maternity clothes or get themselves to their prenatal appointments or to even afford them. And so when we learned that, it was a little bit of a surprise. We didn't realize that that is typically how it works. But as soon as we found out that we were not only going to be able to extend the love of Christ to this little baby, but also to, this baby's first mom, we were totally on board with that. And it actually made us really glad that we can really extend that love to her as well.
I think the sad truth is that during this process might be one of the few times that they actually have this amount of care,
Yeah.
because a lot of these women unfortunately is not able to provide that for themselves, and it really is a heartbreaking thing.
Yeah, and despite all of the care they receive, they're still under no obligation to um, go forward with any adoption plan at any point if they
Mm.
need to change their decision, if they've decided that something in their life has caused them to want to parent, or
Circumstances.
circumstances or situation, I was combining the two, change enough that they decide they want to parent, maybe a relative steps forward to help or something. Then that is an option for them at any point, and so there's never pressure just because they're getting help. They are always able to change their mind. And then once the baby is born, it varies from state to state, but there is a requirement for time that needs to go by before they sign the papers. And then like I said, with open adoption, it's not that they're signing the papers and saying goodbye to this child forever. And we even said after papers are signed, like in a week after she's recovered a bit, what's to say we don't call her up and see if she wants to meet at a restaurant for some lunch or something. We really hope to keep an open relationship to help that very hard and brave decision be just a little bit easier.
Yeah, through this we really wanted to help redeem a broken situation.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. And so it's taking a broken situation and doing the next best thing. And I think for everybody involved, that's why we wanted to work with an agency that was really looking out for the best interest of the expectant moms that they work with. And we just loved to hear that they are so in touch with them throughout the journey and also put them in touch with us too. And so we've recently been able to connect more one on one with our matched expectant mom to really just get to know her, and for her to get to know us. She's been able to ask us questions, really just know who our family is. The kids send pictures that they draw just to like say hi to her. And so it's a beautiful situation out of something that was really hard. And there are still hard parts about it for everyone. I mean, I didn't realize how emotionally hard and challenging this was going to be and still is. And even what the future will look like, I'm sure there'll be things we have to navigate. just the nature of having an adopted child versus a biological child. I mean, they're just going to be our child, but they may have their own questions and concerns as they grow. And so I don't think it ever will be totally easy, but it's worth it to do. And I just think that overall, despite the hardships and the unknowns about the emotional parts and the financial parts, it's been a blessing, and I hope that we can continue to be a blessing to all involved.
Yeah, that's an important thing to point out is that once the adoption's done doesn't mean the hard work is over.
Right,
And you're already, as you were saying before, you count the cost as parents and it goes on. And
yeah,
there's a new set of challenges.
right,
And your family's still young, but anybody with grown children will tell you that even biological children, you can't predict what challenges come in your
exactly.
parenting journey. And it's no different with adoption. So it's so wise of you and loving to consider that during this process, even now, and not have a pie in the sky kind of attitude towards it, that once those papers are signed, you're scot free or something like
Right,
that.
right.
So, speaking of hardships and hard things and maybe unexpected things, are there things that through this adoption journey, as much as you were prepared by the agencies as best as they could, were there things that surprised you or bumps in the road that you found more difficult than you expected?
Mm. There were, especially with the financial obligation, which you can talk on more if you'd like. But I think going into it, we had a certain number in our head as what like an average agency cost was, but we didn't know it was just an agency cost. We kind of thought that that was everything. Like if you look online, that number that you see as an average is maybe just the agency cost. It's not including what it costs to have a home study done or to work with a consultant, which we've found really beneficial,
Yeah,
especially,
definitely recommend.
yeah, especially doing like an out of state adoption. Like they have known things we haven't known. So it's been very beneficial.
Very hard to navigate
Yeah.
Without a
without. Yeah,
professional
exactly.
being the
Yeah.
So
middleman for
they
you?
really they
Exactly.
guide you, they help put you in touch with the right agencies, and
Yeah.
100% right.
But that was an additional cost as well as the home study, as well as the background checks, the medical procedures we had to do that were not covered by insurance because they were not like necessary for our health, but just because they needed to be done.
Right.
Like all of that added
A lot of
up,
paperwork.
paperwork and just like going to the town hall and getting like copies of birth certificates and marriage certificates. So all of that cost plus the agency costs. And then we thought, okay, well, then that's it. But then beyond that, we didn't realize that there were medical things that were not included, that we still needed to hire an attorney, that there were post placement visits required from our home study agency. So we were told all of this by our consultant, but I think I was telling you a little bit earlier, it's kind of like if you read a book about riding a bike, you don't truly understand it until you actually get out there and ride the bike yourself. So it's like all of this was like completely disclosed to us up front, but it wasn't until we were like in it that we were like, oh wait, we still have to hire an attorney. That's not included,
Well,
you know?
it's stated, but you don't actually understand like
Right.
so if someone says you can get a home study. You say, okay, that's great. And they say, well, it actually costs this much. Oh, and that's included? And like, no, it's not included. You go, oh, okay. All right. Well, we're already doing this, and now we'll take care of that. Then you hire the agency, which they're very upfront with their cost right away. They say the typical range is, what is it? Online, it's like 30,
Yeah, online it
around
says
30,000.
30,000, but our, consultant was really honest with us that you need a healthier budget, sometimes more
Yeah.
like
So
50,000
most
or
likely you're
more.
not going to see a case around 30,000. It really is the perfect case. I mean, maybe you can speak more to this, but like
It's the perfect
throughout
case
this
because
whole,
we felt like it was from God.
yeah,
Yeah.
and
No case is perfect, but
and
like,
as we've gone through the adoption, the prices have slowly gone up and up and up and up and up and up, and now it's about 3 times what we expected it to be. But throughout this whole thing, God has it's every time you hear like, oh, that's 20,000 more, or that's 10,000 more, or that's 30,000 more, and you're just like, right? But there's still this underlying peace and calmness of God just saying, I've got you. When we were first adopting, she was very adamant of, we have to do this now. And typically it takes about 2 to 3 months to get through your paperwork. She crushed it in a month. And I was like, all right, we gotta slow down, we gotta slow down. Everything was really busy with work. we had a massive workload, and she's like, no, we got to adopt now. We got to adopt now. And I was like, let's just slow down. But she's like, trust me, it takes 18 months to match. She's like, we need to think about extending it. And lo and behold, we were able to match on our second case. So it happened a lot quicker than we expected. But the cool thing is that, like I said before, God has been giving these little confirmations along the way where everything's lining up perfect to show that this really is what God wants us to do. For example, she again, like I said, she was very adamant about we need to get the paperwork in. We need to get the paperwork. The day we signed with the agency was the day, according to the expected mom's due date. That would have been the day that he was conceived.
Amazing.
So it was like God was putting in me, like, get this done fast. Because if we had actually taken as long as what like the average home study takes to happen, like we wouldn't have even seen that case. Like we would have still been working on our home study. But we like I remember our home study agent being like, you are breaking records. I don't know how you're moving through this so fast. You like have stuff done for me before I even ask for it. But it was like all the Lord. Like it was the Lord saying, you need to be proactive here. And so we were, but I felt like I was telling him, like, just in case it takes what the average time is, I want to get started on this. We already have a big gap in between like our third and our fourth, and I love it for what it is, but I was like hoping to not have like another big gap, and she was already like two, and I was like, let's just like get this going. But I feel like I didn't know at the time, but really why that pressure was on me was like the Holy Spirit prompting me to like move, do this now, you know. But then another cool thing was like, as much as I knew that it would probably take a while to match, and we never knew exactly what day we would match. I didn't know if it was me wanting to match on my daughter Adele's birthday or the Lord saying we were going to, but either way, I remember praying a little bit from the very start back when we started our paperwork in June, like, Lord, like, I hope we match on Adele's birthday. I really wanted this for her, but I didn't know if it was me just wanting it for her or if it was like the Lord kind of preparing my heart for this. But I remember going to bed the night before her birthday and telling him, like, I think we're going to get a call tomorrow from our consultant that we're matched. And he just thought I was like delusional because I had been telling him it takes 18 months to match. So he's like, you are crazy. But I remember just like being in the kitchen on Adele's birthday, having like breakfast, and my phone rings. And I was like, it's our consultant. And he was home because he
She
stayed
threw the
home
phone at me. It's
for
like,
Adele's
record.
birthday. So I was like, record this. And even that was cool that we got to record that special moment. He would have been at work and we wouldn't have had any way to. But I saw our consultant calling, and she normally emails if the mom says no, but she calls if the mom says yes. So when I saw a call, I was trying not to get too excited, but because there are sometimes other reasons they call. But I was like, this might be it. And it's the day that I feel like God told me we were going to match. And we did. So that was such a cool thing. And there have been so many other confirmations too. So throughout the challenges with the emotions and the finances, the unknowns, God has given us those little confirmations to keep going. There were times where I was like, oh my goodness, should we stop? We did not know that. We did not understand that was part of the process. I don't think we're comfortable with that. I felt like God gave us these confirmations to say, keep going. This is what I want you to do. And we also just kind of learned that you have to be comfortable with the uncomfortable. Just pick which of the uncomfortable things you're the most comfortable with and go with that one. So that's kind of where we've landed for really now since June. And so coming up on traveling next month, we are not only looking forward to, bringing this little sweet baby into our family, but also to just be able to kind of take like a deep breath for a second, I think.
Yeah, all the anticipation, all the buildup,
Yes.
all the hard work that's going into it. You mentioned that you have to kind of pick your heart and pick what things you're willing to be uncomfortable with. Do you think that plays into the decision that a adopted family needs to make, whether they go with a private agency or through foster care, or what type of adoption agency they use?
I think so, because you're going to have challenges to every type of adoption, whether it's international or domestic or through foster care. And for us, yeah, it definitely was like, okay, let's explore the hard parts about each of these. They're all hard. Well, looks like maybe international wouldn't work because of how long you need to stay in that other country. And we wouldn't want to be away from our other kids that long. But if they came, it would be really expensive. Or how could you get away from work that long, Foster care, to adopt through foster care, we had looked into when we briefly looked into it a few years ago, like I had mentioned earlier. And it's a beautiful thing and there's such a need for it. I know that you can speak to that. And I value that there are foster families, but we feel like there's another need, and that is also for adoptive families, because with foster care, a lot of times the goal is to reunify, and sometimes adoption is an option with that. But you just never know going into it if that is the way it will work out. And I think because of my mom's situation being fostered and actually aging out before she was adopted, I just personally felt like we wanted to give a home to a child from the start, that they never had to wonder if they were ever going to get to be adopted or not. Because if there was a situation where reunification wasn't possible, but also maybe they didn't have an option of being adopted for whatever reason, it just felt like I've kind of thought of it like this, like there are police officers and there are firefighters. So imagine that as being like foster families and adoptive families. There's a need for both firefighters and police officers, right? Um, but like if my house is on fire, I want a firefighter there. And if I'm being robbed, I want a police officer. Like I think there are certain situations that a like family is needed, and certain situations where an adoptive family is needed. Does that make sense?
I love that analogy. A need for both.
Yeah.
And you have to be in tune to what God is calling you to do for your family, and
Mhm.
not solely look at the tangible, about
Right.
cost or how quickly it's going to happen, or
Right.
maybe the fleshly side of us that wants to have things done in a certain way,
Right.
but to really go before the Lord and ask, how did you make our family? And,
Yeah.
you know, and both are very much needed. So
Yeah, definitely.
God is creating all of these children. He's the author of all of our lives, so He's got a plan for them. And if it's not through foster care and it's through international or domestic adoption, He knows best. And I applaud you guys for being able to step up into that role and work through the fears and the challenges of everything that you shared with us, from the unknowns, the financial hardships. Um, I did want to touch real quick on that part of it, because I
Sure.
think that there are a lot of misunderstandings when it comes to the finances for adoption. As you said, a lot of families get one number when they're first looking
Right.
at it, and that number creeps up and there's unexpected costs. And not everyone, and most people, including yourselves, are, have unending funds. We all have a
Right.
budget to live on, whatever that
Yeah.
is. And so could you talk a little bit about the different avenues to um, fund an adoption? And
Sure.
people can sometimes not want to help with a private adoption because they feel like it's not their job to do that. It's on your shoulders as the
Yeah.
adoptive parents. But I know from my perspective, we can all come along this the support of this child,
Yeah.
the support of this expected mom. We don't have to be the ones adopting. So maybe you're not called to adopt, right? The listeners and watchers here maybe aren't called to adopt themselves, but they can play a part.
Yeah, and I
And
think as Christians, we all should have our hand and our part in adoption. But if we're not called to adopt ourselves, we should be willing to help to support those who are. And I think you're right that some people are hesitant to help because they assume that if you can't afford to adopt, you shouldn't be adopting. But, it doesn't require most people to be into debt, thousands of dollars, or to have to save thousands of dollars to start their family. So it's not that a lot of times families adopting can't support another child, but getting to that point where they can adopt them can be a really big setback. And so when we started the process, we did come up with some fundraising opportunities, and because of my beautiful, wonderful Instagram family and friends, our community there generously blessed us by participating in the different fundraisers we had. We did something called a sticky note fundraiser, where they purchased a sticky note that had a number written on it, and under certain sticky notes were prizes. That was really successful. And we did some raffles, and we also just shared our GoFundMe, and people were really helpful in that regard. But also not in the same way we expected. Not that we're not so thankful for what was raised, but it was actually quite a bit of work to raise that money, because it wasn't a lot of straight donations. It was some, and we're so grateful for that. But a lot of it was putting the work into having an event or having a raffle, reaching out to businesses to see if they would be willing to donate items. Um, and then there's also the grant opportunity for a lot of families. But we just, I think, went into it a little naive, assuming we would qualify for grants, not realizing that you have to usually be home study approved for the grant. And then you also have to not have brought the child home. So right there, you're in a window of time that you're able to apply. Some grants only have applications happening 2 to 4 times a year. So if your window is not in one of those grant periods, you can't apply for that, specific grant.
Mm.
Then there are other restrictions, like sometimes you have to have no biological children. You have to be maybe adopting with a nonprofit organization. There are a lot of specifications. It's another area that God has grown our faith, asked us to trust Him before we have all the answers.
Mm.
And I also think we've learned to appreciate why adoption is what it costs. I think you go into it and you just assume like something's weird here, like who's making all this money?
That's what we thought.
Right, that's what we thought.
Yeah.
But really, every single person that is paid is playing a very crucial role in making sure that this child is safely brought into a home.
Mm.
And it's
And
not
that
one person.
there's no legal things in the end
Right,
where every T is crossed, every I is dotted, and just making sure that once you're actually bringing the child into your home,
right,
one, there's home studies after, home visits after,
right.
making sure that the child is placed in a safe home, and then also making sure that there's no it's finalized, and it's really good. But and the reality is too, as a believers, God doesn't call us to be comfortable. He never tells us, "I want you to be comfortable with this," or "I want you to only be," once you're ready. He just says, "I want you to be obedient," and then He'll take care of the rest. And we can stress, and we can cry to Him, and we can complain about it. And which, trust me, I have. At the end of the day, like, we've submitted our lives to Him. We are going to be obedient to His calling. He's confirmed that this is what He wants us to do, and it's out of our hands. And we're it kind of feels like God's grabbing our shoulders. And I was praying about this the other day, where He said, I was like, God, I was like, I feel like you're just grabbing my shoulders blindly leading me. And I was like, what in the world? Like, is this not how I expected it to be? And he said, why are you saying that like it's a bad thing? Well, he didn't speak audibly, but he spoke to my heart. I said, why are you saying that like it's a bad thing? It's like, I am the creator of the heavens and the earth. I'm the one who walks on water. I'm the one who created water. I'm the one who separated the waters from the waters in the very beginning. He's like, I'm the one who can speak and I can part the waters. He's like, I can do anything. He said, I can take fish and I can multiply. I can do whatever I want to do, and no one's going to stop me. He said, so why are you saying that like it's a bad thing? And I was like completely humbled. I was completely like, okay, I'm so sorry. I'm not going to say that anymore. Because God just wants your obedience, and then He'll do great things through your lives. But you've got to be able to get out of your comfort zone.
And if
Amen.
there's anything that has strengthened our marriage, our family, our faith, it's adopting.
Yeah.
And so it's been a gift to us as much as we hope for it to be a gift for this
Yeah.
child and this mother,
Yeah.
honestly.
It's very refining.
So I always like to ask our out of the mouths guest if there's any specific organization or resource or anything that has helped you along the way in this process that we can kind of give a little shout out to, because people that are going to come to our channel and hear your story are in your shoes probably, and they
Yeah.
are just as, they're somewhere along the process, and something that you've encountered that might help them that you want to share would be wonderful.
Sure. Um, a friend had adopted before us out of state, but she recommended a consultant to us that works with, almost all of the different states. So even though she was out of state, she knew she'd help us here in Rhode Island. And that was really helpful for me as an overthinker because there were a lot of consultant options. And I did have a phone call with two of them, one of them being the one she recommended. And they both sounded really lovely, but I just decided that I would go with the one that I had been referred to from a friend who had personally worked with them. And they have been just such a godsend. They've been so amazing, really like become a friend to us. And that's Faithful Adoption Consultants. And so we've worked with them from the very start, and we've been so happy with them. They've answered all of our questions. They've been so upfront about everything with us. They've saved us money because we thought something appeared to be a less expensive option for, say, like the home study, but then reading between the lines, they were like, that'll actually end up costing you more. So they like helped us with that. So they not only have been a helpful consultant, but really just become a friend, and they check in with us now. Like, it's not like we matched in that's it. We did our job. They like continue to reach out to us, see how we're doing, and we feel like we're part of their family, and we love that. So they've been great.
So you mentioned having a consultant is
Mhm.
like your number one tip for adoptive parents to get somebody who can be your advocate in this whole process. So
Mhm.
just to clarify for the viewers, is that something you do before or after you search out an agency?
So we found a consultant before because not only does the consultant help connect you to agencies, they have something called a multi-agency approach where instead of being limited to showing our profile to the expectant parents of just one agency, our profile book is shown to expectant parents at multiple agencies, which can help you match faster. Their average time is still more like a year to 18 months. And as we mentioned, we match really fast, which was a really big God thing. But sometimes working with one agency, the wait time can be more like 3 years because you only have the expectant parents at that agency looking at your profile. So that was one benefit to a consultant, but to us, that was kind of just like an added benefit. The main reason why we wanted to work with a consultant is to help guide us for the things we didn't know. And so sometimes people will come to a consultant after they've already been home study approved, but we did the opposite and we would recommend that because they helped us find a home study agency that we could trust. And they asked us, like, different questions about what our journey was and what we were hoping to have in this adoption process, and they helped us find the people that made sense for that. And then same, like we asked them questions anytime we needed it. So they
Yeah.
helped connect us to the home study agent.
Mm.
Then beyond that, they connected us to the agencies that made sense for our
I
situation.
don't think we could have done it without them. There's too many things you don't know. And
Yeah.
this is what they do.
Too many variables,
Too
too
many
many
variables,
choices out
Right.
too
there.
many yeah, exactly.
So to
Yeah.
learn about how adoption worked, I did call several agencies, but I quickly decided that rather than committing to one specific agency, especially not having options in our state, I had to go out of state anyway. And then I thought, well, if I'm going to be out of state, we might as well have multiple agencies we can work with. And our consultants have done the work of building these relationships with these agencies. And we knew that we were going to be working with a really ethical, wholesome agency. So they kind of do that homework for you so you're comfortable with all of the terms, conditions, and policies and everything.
Yeah.
And you mentioned off camera about a specific situation when it came to making a decision along this process of having to get clearance to
Mhm.
adopt in a state outside of your own. And
Mhm.
so one of the things you learned was that some states require additional clearances. And tell us that story because I feel like that was another bit of encouragement from God along the way.
Yeah, another really cool God thing was as we were deciding, what options we had with paperwork and clearances, we realized that almost all of the states, your home study allowed you to be able to match in, but there was one state that you had to pay for an additional clearance because they have like another level of adoption requirements. And at first we thought, well, this is already like a big financial commitment. I don't think we need to spend more on a state we might not even match in. And there are 50 states, so we're probably fine without that state. And then we didn't have to spend that additional cost. But at the last minute he was like, I don't know, I just don't think we should like leave that state off the table. And so we had already said no to that clearance, but we decided to actually pause our paperwork process, which delayed us from even seeing cases like a week or two, to then go get additional fingerprints and additional clearances, pay the additional state fee to be basically approved to be able to match in that state should we. And then that's the state we matched in.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So we wouldn't have even seen that case if we hadn't have done that. So that was like a Holy Spirit, like, you gotta do that paperwork, you gotta do that clearance.
Yeah.
So just really cool.
That's so awesome. I'm so glad that you guys put in all the different ways that God has, in little and big ways, kept you afloat in this process, pointed you in the right direction, opened doors that you didn't think could be opened, and closed some doors that you assumed would be open in
Right.
the whole process. That's really beautiful. So I thank you guys so much for sharing this part of your life. I mean, you have a beautiful family, and I think that what you shared here today is going to bless so many people that are looking to adopt, that are maybe scared to take that first step, and they can see through your family's example that you don't have to have all the answers. You just have to be obedient.
Mm,
And if this is how God wants to increase your family, then this is the step you take.
mm.
Mhm.
So we thank you guys so much for sharing and being on the podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.